Welcome to the Water People podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, and my co-host is Dave Rastovich. This season is supported by Patagonia, whose purpose-driven mission is to use business to save our home planet. We acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the first and ongoing custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have lived, worked, and cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people who continue to practice the cultural, spiritual, and educational customs of their ancestors. Today we're in conversation with surfer, filmmaker, and musician Jack Johnson. Jack studied film at UCSB and went on to make culture-shaping movies like Thicker Than Water and A Broke Down Melody. More recently, he's a Grammy-nominated artist and the founder of 2 charitable foundations with his wife and business partner Kim, including the Johnson Ohana Charitable Foundation, which supports and funds environmental, art, and music education, and the Kokua Hawaii Foundation, which provides experiential environmental education in the schools and communities of Hawaii. We caught up with Jack as he prepped to release his 8th studio album, Meet the Moonlight, in June 2022, and we got to quiz him about balancing family and work, the function of the artist today, and where style comes from, both in music and in surfing. We hope you enjoy.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, you too.
We miss you all. We miss seeing you guys here in this amazing time of year right now.
I know, I miss you guys too. Can't wait till we can all hang.
Where are you right now, Jack?
I'm in LA actually. So we're rehearsing for our tour starting up pretty soon. And then we've had a crazy couple of days. It's like, you guys know my normal life pretty well. And then it's like every once in a while I find myself in this situation where I'm like, I played Jimmy Kimmel last night and the president of the United States was on the show. And then it was like Secret Service people everywhere, like holding their earphones and stuff and like cops everywhere. And then I'm like going around to all these different radio shows and stuff today. And it's all actually pretty fun and exciting, but it's, couldn't do it all the time for sure. Yeah. But it's kind of fun to come in and out of it.
I bet. When was the last time you were in this flurry? Was it 2017, that time?
Yeah. It would have been 2017. Exactly. And so It's been 5 years, kind of longest in between we've ever had between 2 cycles of putting out an album.
Yep. How interesting. Maybe we'll save. I've got a couple of questions straight away that popped into my mind that would be interesting to get your perspective on, but we'll circle around back to that.
Yeah, we always begin these conversations, Jack, by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a story like that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, a time that I can remember where it was just, I can remember exactly where I was on the part of the road I was driving. I was on my way to school in high school, went to Kahuku High School, and I was in my little truck and my friends were all in the truck. And we used to listen to KTUH, like the college radio station, and this song by Fugazi came on called Waiting Room. And when that song came on the radio, it was like, it just defined, I'd never heard something like, I'd heard rock music and all this stuff, but it all kind of felt almost unattainable or like you couldn't do it. When I heard Waiting Room, it was this moment where I was like, oh, I got to make a band. Like me and my friends need to be in a band. And like that song was like the blueprint. When I heard it, I was like, we could almost make that sound. And it was funny because that was the first thing I'd heard by Ian MacKaye. And then I went to find out that he had another group called Minor Threat when he was even younger. And it was even more attainable because it was just 4 teenagers in a room doing their best. And all of a sudden I was like, all right, you play bass, you play guitar, you kind of know how to play drums. Let's do this. Like we started just getting together in my brother Trent's garage and practicing every day. It was so much fun. So I don't know, like ever since then, I remember like I didn't have a band and I didn't really have an idea I would have a band. And then heard this one song, almost pulled over to be able to listen because sometimes the radio station would go in and out, but we were kind of late for school. So we're like, no, keep going. But we're like, what is this? What is this? And we waited to hear what the name of the song was and everything. And then it was like, from there, it was like, I've always had a band, like whether it was that band or in college, I had a band and then I kind of doing my own stuff. But that was sort of the moment to decide like, I got to do this.
Wow. That's classic. And when you heard that, was it the feeling of wanting to know what that felt like that made you want to pursue it? Or did you like want to have a band so that you could have really, really good wild parties? Or was it to meet girls? Or like, what was the next layer in there that was making you want to do that?
Yeah, no, I think it was you could hear something in that song that was the rawness of friends hanging out, making something together. There was like this emotion the song had, and there's like this really cool backing vocal track on the song that later I would realize it was very Clash-like. I didn't know the Clash well enough to know, but like when you listen to those Clash recordings and there's always like somebody in the back just like yelling, a lot of times it's just like, seems like somebody in the corner of the room just decided to let loose. And it's, it's got that feeling of like, hey, nobody's scripting this. And there's some people in there and they're just like, there's no rules that somebody has to follow. If like the other guy in the band wants to just yell a backup lyric, they can, you know, and it was that feeling. It was like things were off mic and away over there. And it felt like it was made in a garage. And I had just been playing guitar enough to kind of like know some power chords and whatnot. And so when I heard that, it made me feel like, I think back to your question, it was just like, what could be more fun than like, you know, well, I guess the thing would be more fun, we know, is like surfing and stuff, but I already had that. And so it's like, what else could be more fun than just like when the waves are flat to be able to get like a bunch of friends together and just try to make music, you know, the best we could. And everything else like that you mentioned were the byproducts. Like I didn't really realize that, you know, that you could play a song to a girl and stuff like that until later. And especially it wasn't the kind of music that we were trying for. It was very just raw, like kind of punk rock stuff.
You mentioned surfing, Jack. A lot of us know that you are a surfer and a really talented surfer. I was curious to ask about your foundational relationship with water. Oftentimes there's someone who really inspires us or kind of holds our hand through those formative early years with the water. Was there someone like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my dad, my brothers too later, but because first my dad got me comfortable enough where then my brothers could take me out and like push me into waves and stuff when we were out on like open face kind of waves. But like in the very beginning, it was my dad taking me out. And it's wild. It's funny. I'm like only thinking about this right now, but I've had this memory where like my dad had me on the front of his board and he was surfing. I forget if he was on his knees or standing up or what, but he had his hand on my shoulder and I was up on the front of his longboard. And it was like this double up kind of sandbar day at Pupukea. Not thing, but it was like you could get into it real easy on a longboard, and then there was this fun little double up you could kind of ride over and then set up, and then it was peeling, just like this peeling sandbar. And I remember being a little kid and watching the face of the wave, like getting more and more kind of coming over, and then all of a sudden being like, whoa, we're about to get barreled. I didn't know what that word was or anything yet, but I just remember like watching the wave come over me. And then just like, it was like we flipped over and like it was underwater and I could feel my dad like grabbing my arm and trying to keep me underwater. We were getting tumbled for a while and they pulled me up to the surface and I was like, whoa, I freaked out. And I don't remember, I just remember that experience. And then now it's funny because like as a dad myself and like going through the phases of trying to teach your kids and just get them stoked and everything, there's some days where you're like, man, that sandbar looks so fun. I bet we can get barreled. And taking the kids out and getting them on the front of a boogie board or a surfboard. And I've had a few times where like you maybe get one, then you get greedy, like, let's go get another one. And then all of a sudden you go on like a 4-footer or 5-footer or something. Then all of a sudden it's like, and you get too deep. And then all of a sudden it's like, they don't want to be in the water for like 3 months, you know, because they're like, that's freaky. Like
we're navigating that right now.
Yeah. Right. You guys know it. So you tend to blow it a few times and you can't help it because you just want them to get barreled. But it's funny. I have the memory. It's like one of my earliest memories of being on a wave is just getting fully pitted, but it was a bit of a closeout.
Well, that's nice to know that can happen and it doesn't wreck the trajectory of a surfing life forever.
Yeah. It's just a quick deviation, you know, and then it's try some other interest for a little bit, and then if you're lucky, they get back into it. All my kids took to it; they all love surfing now. So
that's awesome. I can imagine it's in your blood and in your bones. It makes me think, like you just said then, about the other interests and things. And I have to say that I've always been hugely impressed and respectful of the many skills you have and your brothers and the circle. It seems like you have your inner circle in Hawaii where there is music, there's surfing, there's sort of, you know, I guess bigger picture thinking and sort of philosophical discussion, and food growing and all these, you know, sailing. I probably said sailing already, but to me it's a deep part of it. And I was curious, was that also from your dad? Like, where did that come from, that kind of Renaissance man thing where that you have many and varied interests?
Yeah, definitely from a lot from my dad. He was the kind of guy where like pretty big shoes to fill. He was never trying to get you to fill him or anything, but just he was an eccentric. He kind of he interesting thing about my dad is when he was about 20 years old, he fixed the old boat, and he had done like a little bit of sailing. Somebody kind of gave him an old beat up sailing boat, and he fixed the thing up just enough, and then he sailed around California for a little while where he was born. And then he decided to sail to Hawaii when he was 20 years old. And he kind of used to always joke that that's how he learned how to sail, was just going for it. And just like, you think back, I mean, it's like, it's one thing to think about doing it now if you're 20, if you're that young and had all the devices in the world to be able to like track it just in case and all that stuff. But there was just like no GPS, nothing. And he just went for it. It's like, hey, honey, I'll see. My oldest brother was already a baby. He was like 1 year old or something. He's like, hey, I'll meet you over in Hawaii. So my mom flew over like in a month, and she just kind of like went around and tried to find them, and they found each other again. And so, wow. But anyways, he was pretty far out, like he definitely, you guys had a chance to meet my dad, right? Over the years.
I did. Yeah. I got
probably had to surf together and stuff. Yeah. And so, anyways, like he was always just kind of off on pretty cool adventures. He was very much like a family man and like a great dad, but it was kind of cool because sometimes when I was real little, I'd be like, where's dad? And my mom was like, oh, she showed me on a map. Like he went down here to help this guy sail his boat back to Hawaii, because sometimes people would get my dad to come along for an adventure if they needed another person to do the sail that wasn't quite as desirable. Like sometimes people like to kind of go for a downwind course down to Tahiti and whatnot, but coming back isn't always that easy, And so like sometimes they would hire my dad to like do the upwind sail. And so anyways, he was always off on cool adventures like that. And then he would always come back home. And he was into sailing, and he was really into music. He never played music, but he would always, it was cool because like thinking back right now, like he used to always be like, check this song out. And he would like play me songs. He always would hang out in his little shed. He had like a work shed out back. And so some nights I just kind of wandered out there, and I was a little kid, and he would have like, it was his tool shed. So he had all these kind of old school stuff, and he would like give me a hammer and like a 2x4. And I would just be like I'm talking real little, and just trying to nail things, or he'd show me how this. And so anyway, I had these memories of like sitting out in my dad's tool shed, trying to figure out how tools worked and stuff. But he'd always be like, check this song out. You turn it up real loud, and it'd be like either a Gabi Pahinui song, like an old Hawaiian song. But even like with K2H, they would always have these different DJs. It was like heavy metal hour or punk rock or Brazilian music or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he would just get really into all of it. He would always like, check this out. And it would be like kind of like a punk rock song or something, kind of a drivey thing. And so I think I got a lot of like my love for music from him, even though he didn't play any instruments. I just saw how he would get fully into a song, like talk about the lyrics and stuff. And he'd always play like vinyl records around the house and stuff. But yeah, so my dad, I mean, obviously I haven't talked about anything besides him. He was a huge influence in my life. But my mom, same thing. My mom was always so sweet. She loved to dance. She would always get my dad on the dance floor and stuff like that at the barbecues and parties. And so she was really into music too. It really moved her to the point of getting my dad up on the dance floor.
That's sweet. As a waterman, I'm curious about how Native Hawaiian culture impacted your family and shaped your dad's sort of love of adventure on the ocean. Was that part of your childhood, getting in touch with the local culture in Hawaii?
Yeah, well, yeah. So when he moved there, he was a young man, like 20 years old, and he was a boat builder. And so he fell into like his group of friends were always working on different boats. And so he got quite into like the Hawaiian sailing canoes and stuff, and learning to like rig those and work with the molds even. And there's a great boat builder who still lives over on Molokai named Kirk. That was a good friend of my dad's. And right towards the end of my dad's life, we actually designed a boat all together. I mean, Kirk did most of the work, but we would kind of tell him about the stuff we were hoping to get stuff. And so a lot of those boat designs and stuff were based off of like traditional Hawaiian sailing canoes. And we would always go every summer. We would take with a couple other uncles and different friends. We would go usually sail around one of the outer islands, and we would camp out for like a week on these sailing canoes. And so it was always, you guys have been on them before. It's like they're very narrow, and you could only bring what you could fit in your little spot right in front of you. And so that shaped me quite a bit. Is like some of my fondest memories as a kid were just those times where you don't have much at all. It's just like you bring like one warm thing, you try to keep drying like a dry bag in front of you for nighttime. And then just maybe 2 pairs of trunks, like one that's going to be wet and then one you can put on at night. And those are like a lot of my favorite memories. You don't have any material things with you except for that little gear and those trips. But yeah, and then growing up, I mean, besides like my dad's influence and like learning that the boat stuff through my dad, some of, like the icons and the heroes you have growing up, Duke Hanamoku and Eddie Aikau, like those stories, they're monumental. They're so big because like the story of Eddie Aikau basically being on a boat with a bunch of friends, being too far off to see land and whatnot, but deciding I'm going to be the one to go for it. I'll be back. You guys stay safe here. Like those kind of stories, like growing up as a kid, it almost sounds like Greek mythology or something, but it's like a real person that you can learn about from the Hawaiian culture. That's like, those kind of things were huge. Duke Hanamoku, same thing. And then, the more I've gone on over my years, like lately I've been trying to learn Olala Hawaii quite a bit more, like the Hawaiian language, and through the language you learn the culture. And it's kind of like when I was a kid, it just wasn't quite as available. There weren't the courses to take in high school. It's really nice to see the language coming back now. There's like one of my sons is taking Hawaiian language in his high school right now. And it's like when I was a kid, it was just sort of that generation that not a lot of people were speaking it. And it's beautiful to see the language coming back. But yeah, from growing up there, just like the learning songs and meeting a lot of Hawaiian musicians, and through the music, one of my goals was like, I know all these melodies and like I hear these songs or traditional songs from this place, but I should know what the lyrical content of these songs are. So it's like been one of my, like the goals I have is like to learn Olala Hawaii well enough to be able to hear songs and know what the meanings are. There's a lot of words already that I can pick out and get a general idea of what the song is about, but I want to get to the point where I can have a deeper understanding of the metaphors within the songs.
And to me, Jack, that's like an indication of perhaps that learning spirit you have that came from your family and maybe the culture around you to an extent as well, but like that ability to kind of be in the student role, the beginner's mind.
Yeah. No, it's great to like always feel like a student and always want to learn. I mean, I think if you can keep that ability to learner in life, I talk about that with my kids a lot. Just there's a lot of consumption going on in our culture. Like there's you're constantly consuming information. It's besides like consuming food and like these different types of consumption, it's like so much information coming out. Like if kids aren't careful, they're constantly consuming. And so I always try to tell my kids, like try to produce at least 50, like try to produce more. I mean, ideally like the same amount, but if you can, like produce more than you consume, like do more drawings, write more stories, those kind of things. And it's like with that comes the learning process, like whether it's learning how to make animation, like taking the time to learn how to, whenever you try to produce something, you learn a lot more than you do when you're just consuming. I guess when you consume information, that's part of a learning process too. And you can be inspired by those things, but I think you're right on about the key to life is like keeping that ability to learn and keeping that spark to want to learn.
That's really interesting, Jack, thinking about producing or creating or making as kind of an antidote to defining, or the way our culture tends to define us as consumers, as passive sort of drinkers in of other people's creations. And that makes me want to ask you, as someone who's been an artist for many years, gotten to make a living out of being an artist, what do you lots of us feel this compulsion to create, even if it comes out of nowhere, like the song did for you when you were driving down the road as a teenager. Like you have that feeling. And then so much of culture, whether, you're looking at funding in schools or what we're teaching in schools, doesn't really value the arts and creativity and creation. What for you is the function of the artist today? Like what's the reason why art exists? Like what does it do for us culturally or personally?
That's a really good question. I think I heard an interesting, I wish I could remember his name right now. I've read actually some of his books too. I'll think of it in a minute if I can and bring it back. But he talks about mythology, and different mythologies around the world, and how those same myths like apply in the modern day. And the one he brought up, like a real easy example he could give, was about Medusa, like the story of Medusa. And when you look straight at the problem, Medusa being like the metaphor for this, like something you have to get past, or like a thing. It's like he was comparing it to when you're looking directly at a problem. Sometimes people get frozen from being overwhelmed, like it's too much, and it ends up paralyzing us to the point where we can't even function more. You just see, climate change, take for example. It's like, as a kid right now, you just hear about it. It's like, it's so big, there's nothing I can do. Like, what could I possibly do? It makes you paralyzed from being active and part of the solution. So what he talked about is the metaphor of like, you can only look at Medusa through the reflection. And he brought up like music and art being that reflection. It's like, sometimes it takes somebody to be able to meditate on what that issue or problem is and put it into a digestible way that you can now take a look at it. Maybe it's in a song that's like, makes you feel like there is some hope or some kind of thing like that, but it doesn't dodge the issue, but instead it's like, and like the best thing I can figure out kind of recently, I was having this thought, it's like, through music, I'm not necessarily like ever trying to teach somebody something I don't think that they know. Cause I know for me as like a music fan, most of the times, like when I get something out of a song, it's because somebody has articulated something I already knew or thought, but they finally put it into a poetic line or two with the right emotions to be like, oh, there it is. That's the thought I was thinking about, but they said it perfect. And so like with my music, every once in a while I get this feeling of like, oh, maybe this is worth sharing, because I feel like this is a thought other people might have and they can relate to this, but maybe this is worth sharing because it kind of puts it hits the hammer or the nail on the, whatever metaphor you want to use. It gets the point across and it shares it in a way, So I think in some ways, like music is that reflection that you need to be able to keep pushing forward.
That's so beautifully said, Jack. And it makes me think about like, usefulness and meaningfulness in our lives, and how, we can surf our lives away. We can play music till the cows come home and enjoy that experience. But it can kind of feel a little bit surface level if there isn't a meaningfulness or a usefulness to it somewhere wrapped up in there as well. And and so it's really neat to hear you speak about when you have your lyrics and your thoughts that you're connecting to the emotions of music and doing that in a really inclusive way. I think that's what I got out of what you were just saying there, that it feels like you're standing shoulder to shoulder with the listener rather than up on a stage at people. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. I think I just always I love music so much that it's really easy for me to look at it from either way. It's like on this side of the microphone or on the other side. I've been at shows. Sometimes it's like a show where there's an actual stage and lights. Other times it's just like in the corner of the yard when somebody has a guitar and they're like playing at a get together. And it's like, it's really moving to hear music. And I just always try to remember what it's like when you're listening or participating like from that side. And it really helps me, I think, when I'm singing with people, like if I'm singing and I can back off the microphone and I can hear the crowd singing the words, it's really nice to be able to back off and let them sing for a minute, because I know that for a lot of those people, like that song means something totally different than it means for me. Even though I wrote it, it's like they have different memories of like a road trip or a certain time that song is reminding them of. And it's like really nice to think that the songs could be serving in some way as like a soundtrack for those moments. And I just know how much music has meant for me through life, like other people's songs.
That's so beautiful. And it makes me it makes me want to flash back to when Will Connor and I joined you on, I think it was the All at Once tour in Australia.
Yeah, that was so fun. I love that. That was so fun. I was so glad you were able to come along on it.
I'd love to say that I loved it too, but I think it's a bit more nuanced to my memory. It was probably one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. and you know what Will's like?
You killed it every night.
No, it was like I'd look over at Will and I was playing like percussion stuff and he's singing and playing guitar, and he's got such a beautiful voice, and it's a real delicate kind of voice at times. And I'd look over at him, and right now, even saying this, my heart rate is fucking elevating. But I remember looking over at him and just being like terrified to look up and out at the crowd, because especially the Sydney show, there was like 20,000 people there, right? And I look over at him to try and get some support, like, okay, you feel okay in this, don't you, buddy? And I look over and he's just sweating and his voice is wavering a little bit like this. And I'm like, no, man,
that's the worst.
You got to be confident.
I know the exact feeling. I did that last night. So like like I said, we played. No, I swear to, I mean, I get terrified too. Sure. I've gotten a little more comfortable, but every once in a while, last night we played on this TV show on Jimmy Kimmel, and I looked over at Zach, the piano player in my band, and I needed the exact thing you're talking about. Like, give me a smile, give me something. I'm so freaking nervous. And I looked over at him. He just looked up at me and he looked like super scared too. And I was like, shoot, come on. You were supposed to save me. What just happened? And so like, we had a good laugh after, but it never gets totally easy. I still get terrified. Like,
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
no, not all the time, or I would stop. If it was all the time, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Most of the time is a lot of fun now. And then every once in a while you get in these moments where it's like, what are we doing up here? You get the, it's like the imposter complex, like, or whatever they call it, where I'm like, wait, I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to be here. Like, this is how did I end up here? What happened?
Well, man, you pull it off really well, because all I could see was just that you were exactly the same 30 seconds before you walked on stage to on stage and afterwards. And
oh, good. Thanks.
And then you did a really kind thing too. And I think this was one of my first sort of insights into your like considerate nature. And I remember after one of those shows, Will and I were probably cuddling in the corner, shaking the nerves off somewhere. and you walked over and you mentioned to us, you're like, hey, you guys are doing great. Don't forget to enjoy it. And also remember, like, this is mellow music. When you finish a song, the crowd's not going to go crazy and like applaud like wild and scream and whistle and stuff. They're probably just going to be settling in and simmering with that music and feeling it. So if you don't get this huge response after the songs, don't worry, it's all good. And it was something along those lines that you said, and it was
that's cool.
I really got a lot out of that, because you probably saw how much we were shitting ourselves at that show, and after that it did make it easier. But it did make me aware of just that considerate nature you have, and that you could pick up on some of the subtler things that are happening in big experiences like that. And I think that's a useful thing to talk about right now, because like, young musicians, young people would be listening to this going, how do you stay human, and how do you navigate a world or a life like you are navigating so well?
It's funny. It's like we were having a conversation, me and the band. Like I said, this is the first time we've got to get together and play music in a while and be together and just remember old stories. And we lost a good friend recently, the bass player from Ben Harper's band, Juan Nelson. And we were just talking about all of our memories, because the first tour we ever did was opening for Ben Harper. And the day we got out there, man, Juan walked up to us and just said, hey, you guys, it's so good to have you here. Hey, this is our dressing room. You guys are always welcome in here. If you don't have what you need, come on in here. And every night after the show, he would like watch a lot of the show, and he'd always come up and be like, you guys are doing amazing. You're doing so good. And like, because he could see, it's almost the exact same thing you described. I learned all that stuff just because we were so lucky, because like Ben Harper himself, all those guys were so sweet, but we were just reminiscing on Juan because we lost him recently. But he was just like constantly telling us things like, man, it's so much better when you guys, because we did a lot of shows with those guys, and he'd always be like, you guys are our favorite. It's always the best to have you out here. The vibes are so much better. I'm glad you guys are here. He'd always make you feel like, just like I'd always feel more calm after we talked to Juan. And like, so anyways, we're really lucky to be able to, not just Ben Harper and Innocent Criminals, but other bands we played with, they always kind of shared that same sentiment with us. And so, we just like to pass it on for sure.
Apologies for interrupting the conversation, but we'd like to take a moment to recognize the generous folks who help make this podcast possible. Sunbutter Skincare is committed to protecting people and the planet. They make vegan, reef-safe SPF 50 sunscreen packaged in reusable and recyclable tins. They're also the world's first certified palm oil-free sunscreen brand. Check out sunbutter.com.au to learn more about their skin and ocean-friendly lines of sunscreen, surf zinc, and skincare. Sanook has been advocating for a more playful and inclusive surfing culture for more than 2 decades, while crafting some of the comfiest footwear around. Thanks, Sanook, for your support and for encouraging water people around the globe to protect their happy places. Learn more about Sanook's partnership with the Surfrider Foundation at sanook.com. Thanks also to Gary McNeil Concepts, who make cosmic surfboards for cosmic people. Gaz's boards combine recycled and plant-based materials that are built to last without sacrificing performance. To learn more, head to GaryMcNeilConcepts.com. I did some high-quality journalistic prep last night, Jack, on Google.
Nice.
And there's this little box that comes up like halfway down the page that suggests other search queries or like what other people have asked about a similar person. And the first question that came up was, what happened to musician Jack Johnson? And
oh no, I'm over the hill.
It's been what, 5 years since you released your previous album, and
right.
you're depicted as like this.
I always love.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to digress. Sorry,
No,
I know we have
it.
a delay, so I didn't realize I was talking over you. But I always love typing in like the first couple things, and then like, what does Dave Rostovich, and then you see what it wants, like whatever the most. I think is that the algorithm or something that figures out like what the most common question is, and it's like. It's always funny to see those things, but sorry. Carry on.
It's
what was
good. You're depicted as this like archetypically like mellow guy, and I imagine there's heaps of pressure, outside pressure to go fast, to create lots, to keep producing. How do you balance that pressure with being and enjoying your everyday life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm literally surrounded by friends and family through the whole thing. Like, and it's not the norm, like I have a lot of good friends that I've met over the years that play music, and some people have that situation, but really good people end up in situations where they don't necessarily have great relationships with their business associates, like managers and booking agents and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I just got really lucky. I mean, and it's partly just kind of the things you were talking about before, like the value system that kind of led us to this point. And like, there was long walks that Kim, my wife, I mean, you guys know her, but I just saying that for anybody out there listening. My wife, Kim, and I used to take walks on the beach, like the first couple of record deal offers we got. And I was so lucky to have her because she would just like, sometimes I'd be like, let's do it. This is crazy. I can't believe they're offering that. Like, this is nuts. And she'd be like, I don't know. She's like, if somebody offers you that much money up front, they're going to want a lot on the other side. So like, I'd much rather like, know how much they want you to tour. And like, she would always ask the important questions. I was ready to like jump right in. And so lucky to have her because we would just take these long walks and kind of talk it over. And so instead of getting a real manager, Kim and my good friend Emmett just became my managers. Emmett was the guy editing the surf movies that I was working on at the time. And he was just one of my smarter friends. And so like the three of us would sometimes be in the room and we just start talking about things. And I was like, I think you guys might just be my managers, So they literally read a book on how to be a music manager. I think that was the title. And so it started with that. And then from there, like every person that we would hire would kind of like usually be our friend who seemed like they could probably do that. Let's just get them to do it. And then sometimes those people were actually doing it. And then we would meet them and be like, that person seems like you can hang out with them. And so we would, as we built it, it was just always this family thing. And so I could truly tell you, like, I don't have one single person around me who's like trying to get me to do more than they think I should be doing. Like they all kind of know me and like what's best for you and your family kind of is always kind of considered. So it's just really like a really nice team of friends and family. There's a couple of them that are like earshot right now in the room, just sitting over here hanging out. And it's like, I don't know. I never want these, like a week like this where I'm doing press, for instance, like I'm away from my family for about like 5 days or a week. And I don't ever want that to be like where I'm with people I don't want to be with. I always just want to be spending time with people I love. And so, otherwise it's like kind of a waste of time. And so just real lucky there, kind of going back to your question. It's just surrounded by people who, even when I'm not in the room, are making good choices for me.
We've gotten to share a bit of family time together over the last few years. And something that always strikes me is what a beautiful partnership you and Kim have, both like as parents, as a family, but also publicly with the Kokua Foundation and your other environmental initiatives. I'd love to hear a reflection on what you've learned in 20 years of marriage?
Sure.
Or, a lot of us have heard
Yeah.
the beautiful, sweet love songs. Where are you all at now?
Yeah, it's been a great partnership since we were 18 years old. We met in college, like right at the beginning of college. And it's funny because since our little group of friends, for all those people listening, we all hang out. And no, but anyways, like you guys have known us like since we've been married and all that stuff. But it even goes like before we got married, we were together for a long time, since we were 18 years old. And so like ever since I've been even trying to write songs, she's been there kind of like helping me do it. Like I always consider her to be like my editor, it's like somebody who hears the ideas before anybody else does and can kind of give me feedback. The love songs, not so much. Like those are always just more kind of like a joke to make her laugh. And then when there's like enough truth in it and it becomes like something that I feel like other people can relate to, I share them, but not all of them get shared. Some of them are so silly and dumb. They're just for her. And they make her laugh when they work. And that was all it was for. Other times there's something to them that feels like, oh, this is kind of worth like rearranging and not making it so personal and like growing it into something else. And I do that sometimes. But yeah, so it started with that. And then as we went along, she was going back to school for getting her master's in education. She was becoming a school teacher. And I was just starting to go on the road a little bit. And we spent a little time where she was so busy with school and I was busy like with my friends in the band touring. But we'd meet back up every couple of weeks and we're kind of like, I'm not sure I like this. I don't know me either. And then like she started teaching and it was all exciting stuff we were both doing and we were both having like personal growth. But it was like also like, hey, I don't think we should like continue to be apart this much. I don't think it's going to work for us, And so after a few years of teaching, I stole her and it was a mutual decision, but we said, why don't you come on the road? And then you'd be my kind of like my tour manager. So she used to come and like set up the little merch table at the clubs. And then she would kind of like deal with the ticket counts and all this stuff for me. And so it was cool because then as it grew, she didn't want to have to do all that stuff. We hired real tour managers, but she kind of knew how to set the tone for people. Like, this is what our tour is going to be like. She would help to book all the dates and everything. And it's like, still is a huge part of all the tour planning and still manages my career. But it's, and then with the Kukul Hawaii Foundation, there was like a certain point where I think she really had that, her family, and it's like in her blood, education. They're all teachers. And she just really wanted to get back into education. And I think that we started realizing that as we gathered people, we had this real ability to be able to share things we wanted besides the music. She always kind of saw that she could take the spotlight and like, okay, you got enough spotlights on you. I'm going to shine a couple of these over here on different things. And so it's been a partnership, but it's with a lot of trust in her and like, just, she's really amazing. And so I follow her lead quite a bit on like the organizational stuff. We have Johnson Ohana Foundation, which gives out grants to all the nonprofit groups when we go on tour and funds things. Even when we're off a tour cycle, we're able to fund a lot of the things we want to see in the world with music and art and environmental education. And then Kukul Hawaii Foundation is more centered in Hawaii, and we're very involved in like curriculum for school gardening and that kind of stuff. And now we have this new 8-acre farm that's really exciting. We're developing this learning farm that's for kids to come and have field trips at, and community members come together and do volunteer work days there. It's been a lot of fun. It's like a lot of work, but it's really rewarding. We kind of tend to make ourselves busy no matter what. And so we were just kind of saying, hey, if we're going to be busy, might as well be busy building a kids learning farm. Seems like a worthy endeavor.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm stoked we got there, Jack, because I remember last year we had a yarn before we had a chat like this with John Florence, and we were
that's right. That was fun.
I remember both sort of dorking out on the food growing thing and just speaking about how good it feels to be embedded in the growing cycle, and then sharing that with other people. Likewise, we have a very different version of what you're talking about, but we've had a growing project for the last couple of years that we have lots of people come and join us in the garden and take food, and just how deeply rewarding that's felt for us. And I remember hearing that in you as well. And I was just wondering if there's an update on how things are going there, and any recent epiphanies you've had around food and growing.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. It's we have a partner farmer on the farm now. It's kind of like the way it's divided up is we have our curriculum plots where right now like high school age interns come and they start with like going in the nursery and planting seeds, and then they transfer them over to these plots, and then they grow them all the way to where they can do a little harvest party at the end and like cook food, and the parents come on the last day and like share a meal. That part's one section. And then we have a partner farmer who's growing food for local restaurants and local markets. And he's like a really amazing farmer. And we have him, like our partnership there is that rather than like a transfer of money to be there, he helps us to make sure everything else is kind of working on the property, the irrigation, and he has the know-how. So he like helps us quite a bit with like with our curriculum side of the thing, make sure that's all growing well and on track. And then we've got this other area where we're growing lo'i kalo, which is like the traditional way to grow taro plant. And it's, deeply rooted into the Hawaiian culture. And it's in the creation myth, it's the oldest sibling of the Hawaiian people. It's the older brother. And it's, so it's like a really important crop in Hawaii. And it's been rewarding in that same way you're talking about, just to learn more about, there's so many variety of kalo and each one has a different story and a reason for the name. So that's been a great learning process for me there. And then over in the corner, we have this area called it's the constructed native wetland. And what we've done is take out all these invasive trees, planted a bunch of native wetland plants. And then we've watched now, and enough time has passed to see like all these native insects are coming back. There's this one native dragonfly called pinau. And it's like the biggest dragonfly, not only in Hawaii, but also in all of North America. It's this big blue dragonfly. It's like bigger than your finger. Mm-hmm. And once that started coming back, it was real exciting. And then now birds have actually started coming back. And then these native birds, there's one called the Io in particular. It's like a Hawaiian stilt, and it stands in the water and it eats little insects around and stuff. And that one now started going over these little islands that we kind of shaped to keep mongoose and cats away. And it's starting to sit over there. And so like the last couple of days, I've been gone, but they've been sending me pictures. We have like a bird nerd chat group with my friends, and like the farm manager, his kid Daniel, he's awesome, and he'll send me pictures like, check it out, it's starting to like sit there every morning. I'm wondering if it's like thinking about making a little nest right there and stuff.
Oh,
and
cool.
So anyways, that's been like the real exciting part, is like watching this kind of cycle of native plants and animals starting to return.
I have a kind of a left field turn here, but
good. I'm ready.
I'm curious. So, in surfing, how we all have different styles of surfing. Like everybody.
Oh, yeah. Just put a little more weight on your back foot when you do your bottom turns, Dave. You'll be fine. You'll be able to surf just like
Thank
me.
You.
Yeah.
Oh God, I wasn't going to ask the question, so thank you for jumping in there. Everyone's got like something innate in their surfing style, and then we also on top of that are influenced by the type of waves we grow up surfing, and then we're also influenced by the surfers we see around us. And then somehow at the end of all that, or during all of that, we stumble across our own expressive style in surfing. Mm-hmm. And I was curious about this in regards to music and your particular type of music, and wondering if the way you play and like, I guess the way your really popular music comes out of you, if that is something you just can't get away from, it's your like innate style. It's like when you close your eyes and super late at night and you just disappear into the playing, that's just your style, or how much of how you play has been, influenced and affected by externals.
I want to talk about this for like 20 minutes. Cause at first when you're asking the question, I was starting to think about, I think in the surfing culture, it's like, I will get to the music, I promise. But I feel like there was this time where when you look back, like everybody's style was so distinct, right? Because there was an era where people were mostly riding boards even that were only shaped in that zone. And then like some people had twin fins, some people were on single fins. And of course you're going to have to ride those different, the weight distribution and stuff. And then you get like, you get particular styles, like where one guy might throw his back arm all the way on his bottom turn something, and then the other guys are twisting a whole different way. Like things were so different for a while. And then, we had Curran come along, And I remember just like watching movies and thinking like, okay, where's he putting his back foot? And okay, his toes. I would like literally just want to like surf like current, but it was all through my own kind of desire to do that. So it's like, I think there was like maybe our era, and you're younger than me, but like our era of like being able to see current and a lot of kids saying, I want to surf like that, trying to figure out the best you could. And you got like Kelly Slater's, right? I think of like when I remember seeing Kelly when he was younger, and even yourself, like I can see current in your surfing, but it's still kind of your own stamp, because I think that generation was still trying to figure out the best they could, but nobody was telling them what to do yet. And then now there's still loads of people who have their own cool styles and stuff. But I feel like with the way like professional surfing is taken so serious now and everything, there's so much coaching involved. I feel like it's like people are coached to the point where it's like a lot of it feels a little homogenized and like real similar styles and really good. I mean, it's mind blowing to watch people compete on the levels they do and stuff. But sometimes I kind of miss those days where people had such unique styles. Like each of the guys on tour, even, you know, like during that era where like Aki, Curran, Gary Elkerton, each one was so different. Like the way they'd all surf, you know, Tom Carroll, they all approached their basic fundamental like bottom turns and top turns even different than each other. I guess it's not a negative or positive. It's just interesting to watch as the culture went from being a subculture to like a pop culture. The way that it kind of lost a little bit of the uniqueness of some of the. And so I think you could apply almost the exact same thing to the music. Then it's like some people come up and they kind of follow those innate things they have. There's nobody there to tell them they're doing something wrong. I remember one time, like I sat in the room with this really pretty important and like well-known producer who'd heard like my demo tapes. And then he's like, here, play me that song. And then he kind of asked me, he's like, why do you keep putting sevenths like on all your chords? And I didn't even know what a seventh was at that point. Like, it's like, if you're doing a bar chord and you lift your pinky up, it makes the chord from like a major into like a seventh, you know, like a major, I don't know if it's a major seventh. I still don't know what the hell that's up. But it's so like, but he was like telling me, he's like, no, you shouldn't put a seventh there, you know, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, really? And all of a sudden I felt like, oh shoot, like all this, like it was one of the first times I'd been in the room with like a professional, because he had heard that, like when I was making September sessions and Thicker Than Water, I had these little like floating around tapes. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I knew it. Like, I don't know anything kind of thing. But then you go in a room with somebody else, that would be almost the equivalent of like a surf coach. Like they're going to kind of tell you like, oh, no, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. You should do it like this kind of thing. There's a certain way. Whereas you get in a room with somebody else and they'll realize like, oh, that's what makes your stuff unique. You're putting sevenths on everything and nobody else does that. So whatever, just keep rolling with it. And so I think music's very similar. Like you hear some people and it's like all style and all just like a beautiful thing. And then you hear other people and it's like a lot of technique and very practiced. And it's like, both can be great. Like you hear people sometimes that are mind-blowingly great, but you can tell they've almost been coached, you know what I mean? And I tend to like the music that's less that and more of the people going kind of with the thing that they found naturally.
Jack, one of the things I love, and I think one of the elements that resonate with so many people about your music, especially lyrically, is the savoring of simplicity. It's like this interjection or reminder of the beauty and the elements that we can be appreciating all the time. Dreams come up thematically a lot in your lyrics. Can you talk to us about that? Have you studied Jung in some way, or is it? Yeah.
Only through like Joseph Campbell talks a lot about Carl Jung. Yeah. And so I can't pretend to know too much. I know certain like quotes and stuff from Carl Jung. Me and Zach, who plays piano in the band, like we sometimes joke, like, what else is there besides like dreams and time and the heart? Like, it's so easy to come back to these like certain themes through songs, you know, and it's like, I constantly want to talk about the passing of time and dreams. It's just like so fascinating, those things. You can dig so deep into them. Dreams are really interesting because like, what the hell are they? Like, what's going on there? Like, I never know. Like, you wake up in the morning sometimes and I'll think like, what? No, why did I have that? And I'll try to put some meaning to it. But a lot of times it's just like, you can't quite figure out why your mind would possibly go into that place. Other times I can be like, oh, it makes a lot of sense of why I would have had that image during the night. And so I don't know. I like to always do my best to kind of like write the dreams down if I can, as I still remember, because sometimes I'll remember them and then like later in the day I can't remember anymore. But if you do take the time to write them down, and then that part, and I remember. Then I went in that room, and like it like starts this kind of chain of events. And whether or not you use those things, it's like sometimes there's one strange little like dichotomy or like juxtaposition of images that lead to like a really interesting lyric, for me. And yeah, so I like to kind of follow the dreams as much as I can. And I have a friend that I just recently found out is one of the most like famous neuroscientists in the world right now. I'll just give him a plug because he's a good friend, but he's got a podcast called the Huberman Lab. It's like a really popular podcast a lot of people are listening to. Somebody was talking about it in there and said his name, and I was like, wait, what? It's like, I know that guy from college. Like, we went to school together. He was my friend. And so I looked him up. I was like, what? That's the same guy. I know that guy. So I called him. And the point of bringing it up is because like I got him on the phone. We were talking for a while, just catching up about old friends and where people are at and stuff. And then at some point I was like, all right, come on, just give me like the 5-minute version. What do I need to know about the brain and stuff? And he was like, all right, here's the deal. He was like, we found out, like, we've done these studies and we don't know exactly what it is, but there's this communication that happens in one part of your brain. We know that this is the part that's active during the night when you're dreaming. And this other part is like when you wake up in the morning, like some other part turns on. And he's probably like, what are you doing, Jack? You're butchering this. It's like something like this, but it's like, there's a communication that happens like for the first hour you're awake between this one part of the dream part of the brain and like the waking part. And there's this little communication happening. And he said, as soon as you look at the phone, they've done these studies and they can see that communication just stops. It's like over. So he was like, the one advice I'll give you is just like, don't look at I don't know, like, we don't know what it does yet or like what the ramifications are, but we do know that phone or like any kind of like device stuff turns off that communication. So he was like, I think for you, like being a songwriter, you definitely want to stay off your phone for like the first 45 minutes of the day if you can, so wow. Sounds kind of logical. And like, we kind of know that anyways, but it was like a good reminder when you're like, sometimes I'll have it there to wake me up in the morning, like on tour or something. Then you like go to turn it off and then you think like, oh, should I check? No, don't do it. Put that thing down.
Don't do it. Another reason to go for the early morning surf if you can.
Yeah, exactly. And that one works good too for the whole red light thing he was explaining too. Wow. Get out in the red light in the morning.
I want to be conscious of our time, Jack, and I know we can all yarn for many, many hours on many things. And the one thing we both really wanted to get to is lyrical content. And we were listening while we were with our little boy Mino last night, having dinner and a fire and a cold night, and we were listening to the latest album. And I was paying even more attention to the lyrics, and I couldn't help but think that these are protest songs delivered in the kindest, most considerate possible way. But if you change the way they were delivered, you could totally be at a rally outside your local council chambers shouting them out, and they would make sense. They would really make sense. And I did a couple terrible versions of that, and Lauren just walked away. But it was making us think about that. And I was just curious about that part of you and reflecting on obviously societal, ecological moments that we're all in right now.
No, that's really cool. It just is kind of like the natural way I do it, in the sense of it's not so intentional. It's just the way I feel like I can do it best in a way. It's kind of the way it comes natural. And then so I work with this guy named Blake Mills, who I hope that we all have a chance to hang out someday together. I've only known him for this year. Like, we started talking back in maybe like September or October or something. And now we know each other really well, because when you spend like 12 hours a day in a studio together, it doesn't take that long. You like become best of friends. And so either that or you hate each other. And so we went the good route. We like became best of friends. So anyways, like, he was a huge part of shaping the sonic qualities on this album, and kind of, he's just like a really, really great guitar player. He's like a very supportive guitar player. On his own, he can do anything he wants, and he has his own albums he puts out too. But when he helped me make this record, he would just always play these parts that weren't like trying to stand out or anything. They were just helping lift and give energy to the things I was playing. And so we just decided, let's start with like 2 guitars on every song and play it live, and then see where the song wanted to go from there. So yeah, I don't have like a perfect answer of like, this is my thought of why to do it a certain way. It's just more like we would sit down and play what felt natural for each song. And that's kind of how we got to it. But it was a lot of fun making it. I feel like I learned a lot about playing guitar on this record, just because I sat with such a good guitar player so much.
I read that Blake
said that working with you on Meet the Moonlight was, quote, one of the most spiritually interesting things he's ever worked on, in light of the culture that we're in that tends to push toward the dystopian, toward the negative, toward the divisive. Jack, I was just wondering if you could lend us any antidotes to those elements. What do you employ in your own life to keep dreaming and keep things positive? That's such a good question. There's a Hawaiian artist named Solomon Enos that I heard give a talk to a bunch of kids once, and he was talking about in art, you have to envision a beautiful future. There's too much dystopian versions of the future being painted in movies and in art in general, and that it's up to you. Like, you can decide what you want the future to look like in your imagery that you create. And so I think in the back of my mind somewhere, I think that's part of it. Whenever I shape a song, like, I want there to be as much hope as possible. Like some songs don't necessarily call for like a junk load of hope, but it's like, I always want there to be some kind of hope within a song. It's like and so anyways, I think that's a really important message for kids. It's like, don't fall victim to thinking that you have to imagine a dystopian future. You know, you have to, for it to become a reality, you have to imagine it first as being beautiful, and try to create that and draw that picture every day if you can.
Thanks for listening with us today. If you have a spare moment, please leave us a review or consider sharing an episode with a friend. Both help us to find the very best stories from our global community of water people. This episode was edited by Ben Alexander. The podcast soundtrack was composed by Shannon Sol Carroll, with additional tunes improvised by Dave and goofy-footed legends Neil Purchase Jr. and Christian Barker. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast.